The morning silence. The morning sun had barely risen, casting a soft orange glow across the construction site. Darius Johnson pulled his old pickup truck into the empty gravel lot, his headlights slicing through the early fog that still clung to the ground like a veil. It was 5:45 a.m., and he was, as always, the first to arrive. The towering skeleton of what would soon become the Crown Heights office plaza stretched above him, its unfinished framework seeming to claw at the sky with an insatiable hunger for the heights. Darius sat in his truck for a moment, letting the quietness settle around him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself. Today, like every day, he reminded himself why he was here. His family relied on him. His two kids, Janae and Malik, needed stability, opportunities he never had. His wife, Monica, worked long hours at a nursing home, and Darius knew he had to do his part too. The air was chilly, and as he stepped out of the truck, he pulled his jacket tighter around his broad shoulders. At 43, his 6'3" frame was imposing, but it bore the marks of years of hard work. His dark skin had long since grown accustomed to the relentless sun, and his hands, strong, calloused, and scarred, told stories of dedication and sacrifice. As he walked toward the foreman's office, the familiar weight of his tool belt settled around his waist, a reassuring presence. Each step was purposeful, his boots crunching against the gravel. In the distance, he could hear the faint sounds of the city waking up. Cars honking, distant voices, the hum of life. But here, in the quiet of the site, it was just him and his thoughts. A few minutes later, the sounds of approaching vehicles reached his ears. He looked over his shoulder and saw Mike and Carlos, two younger workers, pulling up in their beat-up sit-in. They stumbled out, still half asleep, their breaths visible in the cool morning air. Darius raised a hand, a smile breaking across his face. "Morning, fellas," he called out. Mike grinned back, rubbing his hands together to fend off the chill. "Morning, Darius. How do you beat us here every day?" Darius chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Just gotta get up a little earlier, that's all. Early bird gets the worm." "Right." Carlos laughed, still stifling a yawn. "Man, I don't know how you do it. I can barely get out of bed." Darius shrugged, his smile softening. "Gotta do what you gotta do. One day, you'll understand." He clapped Carlos on the shoulder and turned toward the site. "Let's get to work." The three of them made their way to the scaffolding and started setting up for the day. As more workers trickled in, the quietness of the morning gave way to the hum of machinery, the clanging of metal, and the steady rhythm of construction. Darius moved with practiced ease, directing his team, checking their equipment, and ensuring everyone was safe. He took pride in his work, in the precision and skill it demanded. Just as he was settling into the day, a voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. "Johnson." The voice belonged to Mr. Harris, the site manager. He was a thin man with a hawkish nose and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Darius had always felt Harris's gaze linger on him a bit longer than necessary, like the man was constantly evaluating, searching for a mistake. "Yes, sir," Darius called back, straightening up. Harris walked over, his eyes narrowed. "We've got a VIP visiting today. The client's bringing his son along, and I need everything spotless." "Understood." Darius nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll make sure everything's safe and up to standard." Harris gave him a curt nod before moving on, barking orders at others along the way. Darius sighed. He knew Harris was hard on everyone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was under a microscope, his every move scrutinized. As the morning wore on, Darius tried to put it out of his mind. He focused on the task at hand, guiding his team, and making sure everything was in place. By noon, the site was buzzing with activity. He caught sight of the client, a tall, well-dressed man with an air of importance, walking across the site with his young son trailing behind him, wide-eyed and curious. The boy was no more than 7 or 8, with tousled brown hair and a look of awe as he stared up at the towering beams and scaffolding. Darius couldn't help but smile. He remembered when his own son, Malik, had that same look of wonder whenever he visited a construction site. For a moment, he let himself imagine a future where Malik would walk these same paths, growing up strong and fearless, unburdened by the weight of prejudice or judgment. But the moment was fleeting. Harris's voice rang out again, snapping him back to reality. "Johnson, get over here." Darius took a deep breath, steadying himself, and made his way over. Whatever Harris wanted, he'd handle it. He'd been doing this for years, after all. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would be different. The crossroads of duty and danger. Darius wiped his brow and took in the scene as the VIP client, Mr. Whitman, and his son walked around the construction site. Harris hovered close by, his usual stern demeanor even more rigid as he flanked Mr. Whitman, pointing out various features of the high-rise. Darius continued with his tasks, but his eyes kept drifting back to the child, who seemed entranced by everything around him. Darius noticed the boy's small hands gripping the edge of a beam as he leaned over to get a closer look at the action below. His heart skipped a beat. Construction sites were not playgrounds, and he knew just how dangerous they could be. He wanted to warn the boy, but he was painfully aware of Harris's watchful eyes. Harris already seemed irritated by Darius's presence, as if even existing on his site was an affront. Darius returned to his duties, trying to focus, but something inside him wouldn't let it go. He kept an eye on the young boy, praying he would stay close to his father. As the day went on, Darius was assigned to work on one of the higher levels of the structure, tightening bolts and ensuring the scaffolding was secure. The view was breathtaking from up there. He could see the whole city stretched out before him, bustling with life. He took a moment to appreciate it, the sense of pride he felt in his work bubbling up. No matter the struggles, no matter how he was treated, this was what he lived for. The chance to create, to build something real and lasting. A sudden noise below jerked him out of his thoughts. Looking down, Darius's heart lurched. The boy was on the lower level, separated from his father, leaning too far over the edge of a platform. The child's small foot was perched on the lip of the edge, his hand outstretched as he tried to reach a loose piece of metal that had fallen. His father and Harris were busy talking and hadn't noticed. Darius froze, assessing the situation. He was 2 stories above them. Shouting might startle the boy and cause him to slip, but not shouting could mean he'd miss his chance to act. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to do something, anything. He took a breath, steadying himself. This was it, the crossroads where training, instinct, and heart had to work together. He glanced around, calculating his options, and noticed a ladder leading down to the platform below. Without thinking twice, he dropped his tools, gripped the rungs, and made his way down as quickly as he could, his hands moving deftly over the cold metal. As he got closer, he saw the boy shift his weight again, a slip dangerously close. Darius moved faster. "Hey, kid," he called, his voice calm but firm. "Stay right there, okay? Don't move an inch." The boy looked up, his big eyes widening in surprise and fear. "I dropped my dad's pen," he said, his voice trembling. Darius forced a smile. "I can help you with that. You just stay right there, all right?" He edged closer, every step calculated. One wrong move could cause the entire platform to shift. Finally, he was close enough. He reached out slowly, stretching his hand toward the boy. "Come on, grab my hand, kid. I got you." The boy hesitated for a split second, but then he reached out, placing his small hand in Darius. In one swift motion, Darius pulled him back from the edge, cradling him against his chest. "Thanks, mister," the boy whispered, his face pale with fright. "You're safe now," Darius said, his voice low and comforting. Relief flooded through him, but he knew the moment wouldn't last. Just as he stood up, holding the boy safely, he saw Mr. Whitman and Harris turning the corner, and he knew what was coming. Harris's face darkened as he took in the scene, his gaze flicking between Darius, the boy, and the platform where he had found him. "What in the world are you doing, Johnson?" Harris's voice was a sharp crack against the quiet hum of the site. His face twisted with rage. "Do you have any idea what protocols you've just violated?" Darius tightened his grip on the boy, who was still clinging to him. "Sir," the boy was about to fall. "I had to get him away from the edge. It was a split-second decision. A decision that wasn't yours to make," Harris snapped. "We have protocols for a reason, Johnson. You don't get to make the call. This site is a well-oiled machine, and you—" He jabbed a finger toward Darius, his face flushed. "You're nothing more than a cog. When you start acting outside your role, you jeopardize everything." Mr. Whitman, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. He reached for his son, his face a mix of relief and confusion. "Is that true, Harris? Was my son really in danger?" Harris turned to Whitman, his expression softening instantly. "Of course not, Mr. Whitman. This is all a misunderstanding. Johnson here is known to overstep boundaries. Your son was perfectly safe. This display of heroics was entirely unnecessary." Darius's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. He'd been here before, seen how prejudice could twist even the most heroic act into something else entirely. He wanted to protest, to explain, but he knew that it wouldn't make a difference. To Harris, he was just another worker who could be easily replaced. Mr. Whitman's gaze shifted to Darius, his eyes filled with a complicated mix of gratitude and doubt. "Well, thank you," he said slowly, his voice uncertain. "I suppose you did what you thought was best." Darius nodded, swallowing down his frustration. "I just did what any father would do, sir. Your son was in a dangerous spot, and I couldn't stand by and watch." Harris let out a derisive snort. "A dangerous spot that wouldn't have been an issue if you had stuck to your post, Johnson. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mr. Whitman, I think it's best we discuss this matter privately." With a single nod, Whitman took his son's hand and walked away, casting one last uncertain glance over his shoulder. As soon as they were out of earshot, Harris turned back to Darius, his eyes cold. "This is the last straw, Johnson. I've had enough of your insubordination. You're fired. Pack up your things and leave the site immediately." Darius's stomach dropped, but he held Harris's gaze, refusing to look away. He had given everything to this job, dedicated years of his life, endured disrespect and judgment just to provide for his family. And yet in this moment, all of that loyalty and sacrifice seemed to mean nothing. "Harris," Darius began, his voice steady, "all I did was save that kid's life. If you're going to fire me for that, then so be it." Harris's face twisted in contempt. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? Just pack up and get out of my sight." Darius didn't say another word. He turned, his heart heavy, and made his way back to his locker. As he emptied it, he felt the weight of his reality settling over him like a storm cloud. He thought of Monica, of Janae and Malik, and what he would tell them when he got home. But even as the uncertainty gnawed at him, a quiet sense of peace began to grow within him. In his heart, he knew he had done the right thing. And though he had lost his job, he hadn't lost his dignity. The aftermath of integrity. Darius sat in his truck, his hands resting on the steering wheel as he looked out at the site for what felt like the last time. The towering structure loomed above him, an unfinished monument to the years he'd spent building something larger than himself. But today, instead of pride, he felt only a cold emptiness. After a moment, he reached for his phone and called his wife. Monica, her voice, warm and familiar, answered on the other end. "Hey, Darius, how's your day going?" There was a pause as Darius searched for the right words. He didn't want to worry her, didn't want her to feel the weight of his loss. It's a day, all right," he finally said, forcing a chuckle. Monica's voice softened, sensing something in his tone. "Darius, what happened?" He took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he leaned back against the seat. "I lost my job, Monica. Fired on the spot." There was silence on the other end, and he could almost picture her face, the way her brow would crease as she listened, absorbing the impact. Why? What happened? "They had the client's kid on site today." The boy wandered off, nearly fell off one of the platforms. "I had to act fast, so I got him to safety. But, well, Harris didn't see it that way. He said I overstepped, violated safety protocols." Darius's voice was calm, but inside, he felt the raw sting of the unfairness. In his eyes, "I did everything wrong." Monica sighed, her voice a gentle balm over the wound. "You did the right thing, Darius. You know that, right? No job, no protocol, is worth more than a child's life." "I know," he replied, though the words felt hollow. "But it's just hard, Monica. I've been with this company for years, gave it everything I had. And now," his voice trailed off as he looked at his hands, the calluses and scars that were physical reminders of his labor. "Now I'm back at square one." He heard Monica's resolve strengthen. "Darius, you're not back at square one. You're a good man. This doesn't take that away from you. And we'll get through this. You know we always do." They talked for a few more minutes, Monica's words grounding him, reminding him that there was life beyond this setback. When they hung up, he felt a renewed determination, even if a small part of him still simmered with frustration. As he drove home, he thought about how to explain it to their kids, Janae and Malik. He didn't want them to see him as defeated or broken. He wanted to teach them that sometimes standing up for what's right comes at a cost, but it's a cost worth paying. The drive home felt longer than usual, every mile marked by memories of the sacrifices he'd made for his family. When he finally walked through the front door, Malik was the first to greet him, his 10-year-old face lighting up. "Dad, you're home early." Darius managed a small smile, ruffling Malik's hair. "Yeah, buddy. Thought I'd spend a little extra time with you and your sister today." Janae, his 15-year-old daughter, looked up from the couch, studying him with a sharper gaze. She was always perceptive, able to read people's moods effortlessly. "Something happened, didn't it?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Darius sighed, nodding as he sat down on the couch. "I lost my job today, kids." Malik's face fell, and he looked up at his dad with wide eyes. "Why?" "Well," Darius began, choosing his words carefully, "I had to make a quick decision. There was a little boy on the site, and he was in danger. I did what I thought was right and saved him. But my boss didn't like how I handled it, so he let me go." Janae crossed her arms, her jaw set. "That's not fair, Dad. You saved a kid's life, and they fired you." Darius nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and pain. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, Janae. And sometimes people don't see it for what it is, but that doesn't mean you back down from it. You've got to do what's right, even if there are consequences." Malik looked down, his young mind trying to process it all. "But now, what are we gonna do, Dad?" Darius pulled him close, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're going to be all right. I'll find something else, something better maybe. And no matter what, I'll always make sure you and your sister have what you need." The rest of the evening passed quietly. Monica prepared dinner, and they sat together as a family, finding comfort in each other's presence. The kids had questions, worries about the future, but Darius assured them that they would get through it together. In the days that followed, Darius sent out job applications, reaching out to old contacts in the industry. He pored over job listings each morning, a ritual he'd almost forgotten over the years. But as the days turned into weeks, he found himself facing closed doors and rejection after rejection. His skills were in demand, but the construction world was small, and word about his dismissal spread quickly. People respected his dedication, but some companies saw him as a liability, a worker who had caused a scene. Despite the setbacks, Darius remained focused. He kept a routine, waking up early, taking care of tasks around the house, and keeping his spirits up for his family. Monica supported him unconditionally, her strength and optimism lifting him up when he faltered. She took on extra shifts, determined to make up for the lost income, and he felt a deep appreciation for her resilience. One evening, as he sat on the front porch, an unexpected call came in from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering, his voice cautious. "Hello." A familiar voice responded. "Mr. Johnson, this is Whitman. We met on the site a few weeks ago. I'm the client." Darius's heart skipped a beat, memories of that day rushing back. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" There was a pause on the other end, and Whitman's tone softened. "I heard what happened after that day. My son told me about what you did, how you saved him. And I don't think I ever properly thanked you." Darius swallowed, a hint of relief mingling with surprise. "I was just doing what anyone would have done, sir. Your son was in danger, and I couldn't just stand by." "Well," Whitman continued, "not everyone would have had the courage to act. I'm calling because I wanted to offer you a position with my company. We're expanding, and I need someone with your expertise on my team. We build more than just skyscrapers. We build communities, schools, places that matter. People like you make a difference, and I'd like you to be a part of that." Darius was speechless for a moment, the weight of Whitman's words sinking in. I don't know what to say, sir. I wasn't expecting this. All I'm asking is that you consider it, Mr. Johnson. I think a man like you deserves a chance to build something meaningful, something lasting. I'll have my office send over the details. And of course, the position is yours if you want it." Darius thanked him, the gratitude evident in his voice. When he hung up, he sat in stunned silence, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. Whitman's offer was a lifeline, a reminder that there were people who valued integrity over protocol, who saw worth in his actions rather than in following the rules blindly. He went back inside, where Monica was tidying up the kitchen, and he shared the news with her. She broke into a smile, wrapping her arms around him, her voice filled with pride. "See, Darius, I told you everything happens for a reason." That night, as he lay in bed, Darius felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had always believed in the power of doing what was right, even when it cost him. And now he was being given a second chance. This wasn't just a new job. It was an opportunity to redefine what he could achieve, to work for someone who valued his skills and his values. In the dark quiet of their room, he made a promise to himself and to his family. He would give this new chapter everything he had. He would build, not just for the sake of a paycheck, but to make a difference in his community. A new beginning and a new purpose. The following week, Darius found himself standing in front of a sleek glass building downtown, the headquarters of Whitman Development. Unlike the dusty, rugged construction sites he was used to, the building was a gleaming testament to modern architecture, with its soaring atrium and polished floors. The entire atmosphere felt intimidatingly different from his previous job, and Darius couldn't help but feel a little out of place. As he waited in the lobby, he took a deep breath, grounding himself. This was an opportunity he couldn't afford to squander. Whitman's faith in him, the respect he had shown, made this job feel different, more like a calling than just a paycheck. It wasn't just about building. It was about creating spaces that mattered, environments that uplifted communities. "Mr. Johnson." Darius looked up to see a young woman with a warm smile and a professional demeanor. "I'm Emma, Mr. Whitman's assistant. He's ready to see you now." Following her down a maze of glass-walled corridors, Darius took in the buzz of activity. People moved with purpose, teams collaborating around screens, the hum of energy palpable. This wasn't just an office. It was a place where ideas were being born, where the foundation for future projects was being laid. They reached Whitman's office, and as Emma opened the door, Darius saw him standing by the window, looking out at the skyline. Whitman turned, his face lighting up when he saw Darius. "Mr. Johnson, Good to see you." He extended a hand, and Darius shook it, feeling the surge of confidence. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Whitman," Darius said earnestly. Whitman waved off his thanks with a smile. "Please, call me Richard. And there's no need to thank me. You earned this. I've read over your file, seen the projects you've led, and I've spoken to the workers on site who speak highly of your leadership. We're lucky to have you." They sat down, and Whitman leaned forward, his face serious. "Darius, I didn't just hire you because of your skill with a wrench. I hired you because you've got something rare. A dedication to doing what's right, no matter the consequences. We need that here. I need people who can build more than structures. I want you to help me build a team, to be a mentor to some of the younger guys who are just starting out." Darius felt a swell of pride. The idea of mentoring younger workers, of teaching them what he had learned over years on the job, excited him. "I'd be honored, sir, but I'm no expert in running an office or managing a whole team." Whitman chuckled. "You're a natural leader, Darius. You don't need an office degree to inspire people. Besides, we'll provide training, and I'll be here to guide you. All I ask is that you bring your heart and integrity to the role. Together, we can do something great." They spent the rest of the morning discussing his new responsibilities. Darius would oversee a community project, an affordable housing complex in a neighborhood that had been struggling. Whitman explained that they weren't just building homes, they were creating a community center, a library, and a small park. The vision was to give families a safe, nurturing environment. By the time Darius left Whitman's office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a job. It was a mission, one that aligned with everything he believed in. He knew the importance of community, of having a place where people could feel safe and supported. And now, he had a chance to create that for others. The first day on the project site, Darius felt an odd mixture of excitement and nerves. His crew was a mix of experienced builders and young apprentices just starting out. As he gathered everyone for a quick meeting, he noticed a few skeptical glances, especially from the younger guys. To them, he was an unknown, a newcomer without a college degree, a blue-collar worker elevated to a managerial role. He cleared his throat, looking out at the men and women assembled. "All right, folks. I know I'm new here, but I want you to know something about me." His voice was steady, but his words came from the heart. "I've been on the other side of this job for more than 20 years. I know what it's like to put in a hard day's work, to come home exhausted but proud. And I know what it means to build something that matters." The crowd listened, their expressions softening. "This project isn't just about putting up walls and laying bricks," he continued. "We're building a community, a place where kids can feel safe, where families can grow and support each other. This work is important, and each of you is a vital part of it. So if you've got ideas, suggestions, or concerns, come to me. I want to hear them." A murmur of approval rippled through the group, and Darius could see that he was earning their respect. He knew it would take time to build trust, but this was a start. As they dispersed to begin work, a young man named Terrence approached him. "Hey, Mr. Johnson." Terrence was barely in his 20s, his face eager but uncertain. "I just wanted to say, I've never had a boss who talked to us like that. Most of them just tell us what to do and don't care what we think." Darius smiled, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Terrence, I'm not just your boss. I'm here to work with you. You ever need anything, you come to me, all right?" The young man nodded, his face lighting up with newfound confidence. As Darius watched him head to his workstation, he felt a deep satisfaction. This was what Whitman had meant. This was how he could make a difference. Over the next few months, Darius poured himself into the project, working alongside his team and treating each member with respect. He held regular meetings to listen to their feedback and ideas, fostering an environment where everyone felt valued. For the first time in his career, he wasn't just following orders or performing tasks. He was part of something bigger. He saw his influence growing as the team took more pride in their work, understanding that they weren't just building a housing complex, they were crafting a legacy. Word spread about their efforts, and soon, local news outlets began covering the project, highlighting the affordable housing initiative and the community it was helping to uplift. One day, as they were working on the framework for the community center, Darius received a visitor. A middle-aged woman with a warm smile approached him, her young daughter clinging to her hand. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Johnson?" Darius wiped the sweat from his brow and smiled. "That's me. How can I help you?" The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Reynolds and explained that she lived in the neighborhood. "I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter and we'd struggled to find a safe place to live for years. This project means so much to us." Darius felt a lump rise in his throat. He knelt down to the little girl's eye level, smiling. "Well, we're building this place just for families like yours. I promise we'll do our best to make it safe and beautiful for you." The girl beamed, and Mrs. Reynolds thanked him again, her eyes glistening with gratitude. As they walked away, Darius felt a surge of pride and fulfillment. He was no longer just a construction worker, no longer just building for a paycheck. He was creating spaces that would be the foundation of new lives, new dreams, and new possibilities. Months later, the project was nearing completion, and Darius's name had become well known across Whitman Development. His commitment to the community and his team had set him apart, and his crew had blossomed under his mentorship. They had built not only a beautiful housing complex, but a thriving community that would be a beacon of hope for years to come. At the grand opening ceremony, Whitman took the stage, commending the team for their dedication. Then, with a proud smile, he called Darius up, presenting him with an award for excellence and leadership. The crowd erupted in applause, and as Darius looked out, he saw his family in the audience: Monica, Chanae, and Malik, their faces beaming with pride. He held the award, his hand steady but his heart pounding. Standing there, he knew that his journey was only beginning. He had found his purpose, a place where he could make a difference and inspire others. No longer just a construction worker, Darius had become a leader, a builder of dreams, and a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. As he looked out over the crowd, his voice steady and strong, he said, "We built more than buildings here. We built hope, strength, and unity. This is our community, and it's just the beginning." The audience rose to their feet, and as Darius stood there, he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. A legacy in the making. As weeks turned into months, Darius's influence on the project became undeniable. What had started as a construction job transformed into a movement within Whitman Development. Inspired by Darius's approach, several teams across the company began implementing new practices, focusing on community engagement and worker empowerment. This shift resonated with everyone involved, creating a culture that valued not just the end result, but also the lives it impacted along the way. Darius's team now felt more like a family. He'd worked hard to create a safe space where each person felt valued and heard. He held regular mentorship sessions where he'd gather his younger crew members and share stories from his years on construction sites, discussing not only the technical skills, but also the resilience needed to face life's challenges. These meetings had become a highlight of the week, where everyone laughed, shared advice, and bonded over both their struggles and their dreams. One evening, as the sun began to set over the nearly completed housing complex, Darius gathered his team for what had become their tradition, an end-of-week check-in. The air was filled with anticipation as they stood on the newly laid grass of the community park they'd helped build. The project was only a few weeks away from completion, and Darius wanted to make sure everyone understood just how impactful their work had been. "All right, team," Darius began, his deep voice carrying over the group. "We're almost there. Just a few finishing touches, and this place will be ready for families to move in. I can't tell you how proud I am of each of you." Terrence, the young apprentice who had been with Darius since the beginning, grinned. "Mr. Johnson, I've worked on a few projects before, but none of them felt like this. Usually, we just build and leave. But here, it's like we're part of something that'll last." Darius nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "That's right, Terrence. We're not just building houses, we're building a foundation for families to grow, kids to play, and dreams to take root. Every brick, every nail, every beam, it all matters." As he spoke, he noticed the quiet reverence on each face, a look of pride that went beyond the usual satisfaction of a job well done. They had invested a piece of themselves into this place, knowing that their work would shape lives. It was a rare feeling, one that Darius had only truly begun to appreciate since starting with Whitman Development. After the meeting, most of the crew dispersed, heading home to their families, but Terrence lingered behind, his face thoughtful. Darius raised an eyebrow, inviting him to speak. "Mr. Johnson, can I ask you something?" Terrence's tone was tentative, a stark contrast to his usual playful energy. "Of course, Terrence. What's on your mind?" Terrence looked down, shuffling his feet before he spoke. I grew up in a place a lot like this. My mom raised me and my brothers on her own, and it was rough. We didn't always feel safe, you know. And now, working on this project, it's got me thinking. Do you think I could maybe go to school, study architecture, or something? I want to build places like this, but I don't know if I'm good enough." Darius felt a surge of emotion as he listened. He placed a firm hand on Terrence's shoulder, looking him in the eye. "Terrence, you have the heart and the drive. That's what matters most. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough, least of all yourself. If school is what you want, then go for it. You'd make an incredible architect." Terrence's face lit up, his usual bravado returning. "You really think so?" "I know so," Darius replied, smiling. "And if you ever need help or advice, you know where to find me." They talked for a while longer, discussing Terrence's future plans and how he might balance work with school. As Darius listened, he felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond words. Terrence's dream was a reminder that the work they were doing went beyond brick and mortar. It was planting seeds of hope, giving people the courage to pursue what they once thought impossible. The grand opening of the housing complex was an event that the community eagerly anticipated. Families gathered on the freshly landscaped grounds, marveling at the vibrant colors of the playground, the serene beauty of the park, and the newly built community center that stood as a beacon of unity and hope. Darius could see it in their faces, the relief, the joy, and the renewed sense of possibility. Whitman himself attended, standing proudly beside Darius as they watched families explore their new homes. He turned to Darius, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. "Darius, I want you to know that none of this would have been possible without your leadership. You've given this project a soul." Darius shook his head, smiling humbly. "It wasn't just me, Richard. It was the team, the community. They brought the heart to this project. I just gave them a direction." Whitman chuckled. "Well, sometimes a direction is all people need, and you provided that in spades." He paused, looking thoughtful. "I've been thinking of expanding our community projects division, making this kind of development a core part of what we do. If you're interested, I'd love for you to lead it." Darius's eyes widened, caught off guard. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Whitman replied. "This isn't just a one-time thing. I want more projects like this across the city, maybe even beyond. We could bring positive change to so many communities, and I want someone with vision and integrity to lead it. Someone like you." Darius felt a rush of excitement and responsibility. He thought about everything that had led him here, the years of hard labor, the discrimination he'd endured, and the courage it took to make a stand that ultimately cost him his job. And now, here he was, being offered a chance to shape the future of an entire company division, to influence lives on a scale he had never imagined. "I'd be honored, Richard. Let's do it," he replied, shaking Whitman's hand with a firm grip, sealing a partnership grounded in mutual respect and a shared vision. Over the following months, Darius dove headfirst into his new role as the head of Whitman's Community Development Division. He worked tirelessly, not only overseeing construction projects, but also engaging with local communities to understand their needs and aspirations. He visited neighborhoods, held town hall meetings, and listened to the voices of the people who would call these places home. His work brought him to parts of the city he had never seen before, meeting people from all walks of life. Single parents working multiple jobs, young families struggling to make ends meet, elderly residents seeking stability in their later years. Each story resonated with him, strengthening his resolve to create spaces that honored their resilience and dreams. As his influence grew, he encountered new challenges. Balancing budgets, managing bureaucratic red tape, and negotiating with investors required skills he had never had to hone before. There were moments of self-doubt, times when he questioned if he was truly up for the task. But each time he faltered, he remembered the people he was working for, the young apprentices like Terrence who looked up to him, and the families who deserved a place to call home. One evening, after a long day of meetings and site visits, he returned home, exhausted but content. Monica greeted him at the door, her warm smile instantly easing his weariness. "You're making a real difference out there, Darius," she said as they settled down at the dining table. "People talk about it everywhere I go. They call you the builder of hope." Darius chuckled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "I'm just doing what feels right, Mon. It's funny, back when I started out, I never thought my work would mean anything to anyone beyond my own family. But now, it's like every brick we lay, every wall we raise, it's for something bigger." Monica reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "That's because it is. You've taken everything you've been through and turned it into something good. That's rare, Darius, and I'm so proud of you." In that quiet moment, Darius felt the weight of everything he had accomplished. It wasn't just about building structures. It was about building hope, a legacy that would inspire others to believe in the power of resilience, compassion, and community. Several years later, as he walked through a neighborhood he had helped build, Darius saw children laughing and playing in the park, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the struggles that had once defined their lives. He passed by families sitting on their porches, waving to him with smiles of gratitude. The houses were more than just shelters. They were sanctuaries, places where dreams could flourish. A familiar voice called out from behind him, and he turned to see Terrence, now in his early 30s, wearing an architect's badge. He had graduated from college and joined Whitman Development as a project lead, carrying forward the legacy that Darius had started. "Mr. Johnson," Terrence greeted him with a wide grin. "I've been meaning to thank you. None of this would have been possible without your guidance." Darius smiled, clapping him on the back. "You did this yourself, Terrence. All I did was help you see what you were capable of." Terrence nodded, his eyes shining with respect. "Well, I hope I can be half the leader you were." As Darius looked out over the neighborhood, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had built more than buildings. He had built a future, a legacy of hope that would continue long after he was gone. And in that moment, he knew that every sacrifice, every struggle, had been worth it. Passing the torch and building beyond. Years passed, and Darius Johnson's impact on the city, and beyond, only grew. His work with Whitman Development's Community Development Division had transformed entire neighborhoods, bringing stability and hope to areas that had once been overlooked. Darius had become something of a local hero, known as the Builder of Hope by communities across the city. But as the years went by, he knew he couldn't do it forever. His knees ached a little more each morning, and though his spirit was as strong as ever, his body was beginning to remind him that he'd given it decades of hard labor and dedication. Now in his early 60s, Darius started to think about the future, about the legacy he wanted to leave. He had built homes, schools, community centers, and parks, but he knew that his legacy couldn't just be about the structures he created. It had to be about the people he'd inspired. the lives he'd change, and the dream he wanted to pass on to the next generation. One crisp autumn morning, Darius called a meeting with his team, which now consisted of architects, urban planners, community advocates, and young apprentices, some of whom had started under his wing years ago. Just like Terrence, they gathered in a conference room at the headquarters, their faces reflecting respect and admiration as he stood before them. "All right, everyone," Darius began, his voice steady but laced with a hint of nostalgia. "I want to talk to you about what's next, not just for this team, but for all of us." The room fell silent as Darius continued, his gaze moving from face to face. "I've been with Whitman Development for a long time now. I've seen us grow from a single project to a citywide mission. We've built homes for people who thought they'd never have one, created safe spaces for families who struggled to find them, and restored hope where it was nearly lost. But I'm getting older, and I know it's time for me to think about the future of this division, of the mission we started together." Terrence, now a seasoned architect in his own right, leaned forward, his face filled with concern. "Mr. Johnson, are you saying you're leaving?" Darius smiled, a warm, reassuring smile. "Not today, Terrence, but soon. And when I do, I want to make sure that this work, this purpose, doesn't stop. That's why I called this meeting. It's time we think about the future of this division beyond my years here." He glanced around the room, seeing young faces full of potential and hope. They were the future, and he wanted to leave them with something more than just his projects. He wanted to leave them with his vision, his belief in the power of building communities and changing lives. Darius cleared his throat, speaking with renewed conviction. "What we've done here, it's bigger than any one of us. It's about giving people something real, something that can't be taken away. I want us to expand this work. I want us to take what we've learned here and spread it to other cities, other communities that need us just as much." Terrence raised his hand, his eyes bright with excitement. "I've actually been thinking about that, Mr. Johnson. I was working with some urban planning students at the local college, and they've been looking for ways to get involved with real community projects. Maybe we could start a mentorship program, something where students and young professionals can work with us, learn from us." Darius's smile grew. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, Terrence. A mentorship program would not only give young people hands-on experience, but it would also show them the heart behind this work." The idea sparked a wave of enthusiasm among the team, and over the next few hours, they'd brainstormed initiatives that would carry the division's mission forward. From creating partnerships with local schools to offering apprenticeships in construction and urban design, the team envisioned a future where their work would continue to impact lives, even without Darius at the helm. When the meeting finally wrapped up, Darius felt a sense of peace. He had planted a seed in the hearts of his team, and he knew it would grow into something magnificent. Over the next few months, Darius devoted himself to mentoring his team and preparing them for the day he would step down. He spent time with each person individually, sharing not only his technical knowledge, but also the wisdom he'd gained over a lifetime. He taught them that every nail, every beam, every blueprint had a purpose beyond mere construction. It was about the lives that would fill the spaces they built, the families that would find safety and warmth within those walls. One cold winter evening, Darius and Terrence sat in a quiet corner of a local diner, discussing the final project Darius would oversee: a mixed-use community center that would house affordable apartments, a daycare, a health clinic, and a small library. This project, more than any before, embodied Darius's vision of a space that met the community's needs and fostered a sense of belonging. "You know, Terrence," Darius said, his voice soft but resolute, "this community center, it's my dream project. This is what I always wanted to do, something that serves everyone. It's more than just housing or a park. It's a place where people can come together, where they can find what they need and feel like they belong." Terrence nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "You've changed the way I think about architecture, Mr. Johnson. Before I met you, I thought it was just about design and structure. But now I see it's about creating something meaningful, something lasting. Darius chuckled, leaning back in his chair. That's what makes this work worth it, Terrence. Buildings will rise and fall, but the impact we have on people's lives, that lasts. They spent hours going over the final details of the project, ensuring that every aspect would serve the community's needs. Darius poured his heart into it, knowing it would be his legacy, a tangible, lasting testament to the values he had held dear. The grand opening of the community center was a day filled with joy and pride. Families gathered, exploring the new spaces, marveling at the playground, the clinic, and the library stocked with books donated by the local community. Children's laughter filled the air, their excited voices bouncing off the walls of a space that was now theirs. Darius stood back, watching it all unfold. He saw the familiar faces of families he'd met during community meetings, young parents with their toddlers, elderly residents who finally had a place to connect with others. It was everything he'd dreamed of and more. Richard Whitman approached him, his face beaming with admiration. Darius, you've done it again. This place, it's remarkable. I can't think of anyone else who could have pulled this off. Darius smiled, feeling a quiet pride. Thank you, Richard. This place is a team effort, just like everything we've done. And now, it's time for me to step back and let the team carry it forward. Whitman's expression turned somber, understanding the gravity of Darius's words. You're really retiring then? Darius nodded, his gaze still on the people enjoying the center. Yes, it's time. I've given it my all. And now it's their turn. He spent the rest of the day with his team and the community, celebrating the success of the project. By evening, as the crowd began to thin, he found a quiet moment to reflect. He took one last walk through the community center, pausing to touch the walls and look around, taking in the space that had been built from his dreams and the dedication of so many people. As he stood in the center of the room, Terrence approached him, holding a small framed plaque. Mr. Johnson, we wanted you to have this. He handed it to Darius, who looked down to see an inscription. In honor of Darius Johnson, whose vision, courage, and integrity have shaped this community. May this space serve as a beacon of hope and unity, a reminder of the power of building not just structures, but lives. Darius's eyes misted over as he read the words, feeling a swell of emotions he couldn't quite put into words. He hugged Terrence, the young man who had once been unsure of himself, now a capable leader ready to carry on his legacy. Thank you, Terrence, Darius said, his voice thick with emotion. It's been an honor to work with you, all of you. As he left the community center that evening, Darius felt a profound sense of peace. He knew that he was leaving behind more than just a career. He was leaving behind a legacy of hope, a vision that others would continue to nurture and build upon. In the months that followed, Darius adapted to a slower pace of life, spending more time with his family, enjoying his mornings with Monica, and watching his grandchildren grow. He often returned to the neighborhoods he helped build, seeing firsthand the impact his work had made. People recognized him, greeted him warmly, and thanked him for the safe, welcoming spaces he had created. Darius Johnson, the man who had once been dismissed as just another worker, had transformed not only buildings but lives. He had become a legend in his own right, a builder of communities, a mentor, and a symbol of hope. And though he no longer held a hammer or wore a hard hat, his legacy continued to stand tall, etched into every brick, every beam, and every heart he had touched. The legacy lives on. In retirement, Darius found himself busier than he'd expected. Calls came in from community leaders, organizations, and even universities eager to learn from his years of experience. He was invited to speak at events, to share his journey from a laborer on construction sites to a community builder, and each time he spoke, his story inspired countless others. Despite the quiet life he had envisioned, Darius was becoming something more, a figure of wisdom, a voice for the underrepresented, and a mentor on a scale he had never imagined. But no invitation meant as much to him as the one he received from his old friend, Terrence, who had since risen to the head of the Community Development Division at Whitman Development. Terrence, once his apprentice, was now leading projects across the state, and his vision was as bold as ever. One spring morning, Terrence called with a proposal. "Mr. Johnson, we've been thinking, what if we create a training institute, a place where young people from underserved communities can come to learn trades, get mentorship, and build careers in construction and urban planning? We could name it after you, the Darius Johnson Institute for Community Building." Darius was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of Terrence's words. "Terrence, are you serious? An institute?" "As serious as ever," Terrence replied, his voice warm with excitement. "Think about it. All those lessons you taught me and the rest of the team. About building with purpose, about respecting the communities we serve. We could pass that on to hundreds, maybe thousands of young people. It would be your legacy." Darius felt a lump in his throat, his emotions too complex to express. "I'd be honored, Terrence. If there's a way I can help, I'd like nothing more than to be a part of it." Terrence laughed, his enthusiasm infectious. "Of course, we'll need your guidance, your wisdom. This isn't just a place for training. It's a place for instilling values, for teaching young people that building a community goes beyond brick and mortar. And I can't think of anyone better to help us shape that vision." Over the next year, the planning for the Darius Johnson Institute for Community Building took shape. The institute would provide vocational training in construction trades, architectural basics, and urban planning, along with courses on ethics, leadership, and community engagement. For Darius, the institute represented everything he'd fought for, a chance to create a path for young people who, like him, had once been overlooked, struggling to find opportunities in a world that often didn't see their potential. Darius worked closely with Terrence and a team of educators, community leaders, and architects to design a curriculum that was hands-on, rooted in the values of empathy and integrity. He insisted on programs that focused not only on technical skills, but also on soft skills, listening, understanding, and respecting the needs of the communities they would eventually serve. As the institute neared completion, Darius felt a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment. This was more than just a training facility. It was a place where young people would come to realize their dreams, to discover their strength and resilience, to understand that their work could change lives. It was a place where his story, and the stories of countless others, would be woven into the fabric of the future. The grand opening of the Darius Johnson Institute was a day of celebration and reflection. Families, community members, Whitman Development employees, and even city officials gathered for the event. Journalists covered the occasion, capturing the excitement of what the institute represented, a bridge between ambition and opportunity for young people from marginalized communities. As Darius stood on the stage, looking out over the crowd, he felt a rush of emotions. He saw familiar faces, his wife Monica, his children, his grandchildren, and old friends from the early days of his career. He also saw young people, their eyes bright with hope and eagerness, the future architects, builders, and community leaders who would carry his legacy forward. Terrence stepped forward to introduce Darius, his voice filled with pride. "Today, we celebrate the work of a man whose dedication has inspired us all. The Darius Johnson Institute for Community Building isn't just a school. It's a testament to the power of resilience, integrity, and the belief that every community deserves to be seen, respected, and uplifted. This institute will carry on Mr. Johnson's legacy, ensuring that his values are passed on to future generations." The crowd erupted in applause, and Darius took a moment to steady himself before stepping to the podium. He looked out over the sea of faces, feeling the weight and joy of the moment. "When I started out," he began, his voice steady, "I was just a man trying to make a living, trying to build a better life for my family. I didn't know then that my work would take me here, to this moment. I thought my job was to build structures. But what I learned over the years was that the true work, the real purpose, was to build communities, to give people a place where they could feel safe, valued, and proud. He paused, glancing down at the young students who would be the first to attend the institute. "This place is for you," he continued, his voice softening. "I want each of you to remember that you have a role in shaping this world. Building isn't just about brick and steel. It's about building respect, kindness, and understanding. It's about lifting up those who feel unheard, and it's about creating spaces that honor every life within them." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing across the grounds of the institute. As Darius stepped down from the podium, he was met by countless handshakes, words of thanks, and even a few hugs from young students who saw him as a mentor, a guiding light in their own journeys. The years that followed were some of the most rewarding of Darius's life. Though he was no longer active on construction sites, he continued to visit the institute regularly, giving guest lectures and mentoring students who needed guidance. He became a revered figure at the institute, affectionately called Mr. J by the students, who looked up to him as a grandfatherly mentor. Darius saw himself in many of them: the determination, the hunger for purpose, and the uncertainty that came with trying to find one's place in the world. He guided them not just in their careers, but in understanding the deeper meaning of their work. One day, a young woman named Keisha approached him after a lecture. She was a bright, talented student who had quickly gained a reputation for her innovative ideas in urban planning. "Mr. G," she began, hesitating as she searched for the right words, "I just wanted to thank you. I didn't know if I belonged here when I first started, but your story, it made me believe that I could actually make a difference." Darius smiled, his heart full. "Keisha, you don't just belong here. You're meant to be here. You have the passion and the drive. And remember, making a difference isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, about doing the best you can for the people you serve." Keisha's eyes glistened with tears, and she hugged him tightly. "I won't let you down, Mr. J." Darius hugged her back, feeling a familiar sense of pride. "I know you won't." As the institute flourished, Darius's legacy extended beyond what he had ever dreamed. Graduates of the program went on to lead projects in cities across the country, bringing with them the principles they had learned under his guidance. They built affordable housing, designed inclusive parks, and revitalized struggling neighborhoods. Each project bore the influence of Darius's teachings, an unwavering commitment to integrity, compassion, and a belief in the transformative power of community. In his later years, Darius found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He would often sit on his porch, watching his grandchildren play, thinking about the path he had carved out of hard work, resilience, and heart. He had started as a laborer, someone who simply wanted to build a life for his family. But through each decision, each stand he had taken, he had built something far more enduring, a legacy of hope, courage, and unity. One summer afternoon, as he sat with Monica, looking out over the city that bore countless marks of his work, he turned to her, his eyes soft. "You know, Mon, I didn't think I'd end up here. When I started, I just wanted a job, a way to provide for us. But look at all of this. Look at what we've built together." Monica took his hand, her gaze filled with warmth and pride. "Darius, you always saw something more. You didn't just see a building, you saw the people inside it. That's why your work mattered. That's why it will keep mattering, long after we're gone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. For Darius, there was no greater reward than knowing that his work would live on, that he had left a legacy that would continue to inspire, uplift, and empower others. In the end, Darius Johnson had done far more than build structures. He had built a legacy that would stand the test of time, a legacy of compassion, resilience, and unwavering belief in the strength of community.